412. Next, we have Black Chokeberry, Prairie Song Nursery and Restoration. Thank you, Adam Timpf, for donating this. 770-7256. 770-7256. So much to win. Next, we have Beach Sand Cherry, Prairie Song Nursery and Restoration. Thank you, Adam Timpf, again. 3665145 is the winning raffle ticket. 3665145. Next, a roundleaf serviceberry from Prairie Song Nursery and Restoration. Thank you, Adam. Once more, Adam Timpf. And it's 7707257. That's the winning number. 7707257. Adam Timpf is also to be thanked for Sweet Oxeye, Pale Coneflower, Swamp Rose Mallow, again, Prairie Song Nursery and Restoration. And the ticket numbers here are 3665494, 3665489, and 3665225. So again, there are 3 winning tickets that have been drawn for these. Next, Swamp Milkweed, Butterfly Weed, Poke Milkweed from Prairie Song Nursery and Restoration. Thank you again, Adam Timpf. And the winning tickets, 7707315, 3665427, and 3665217. So again, for item 29, 7707315, 3665427, and 3665217. Next, we have a $250 gift certificate for a group tour in Central America, South America, or the Caribbean from Quest Nature Tours. Thank you, Quest. The winning ticket there, 5490390. Next up, another $250 gift certificate. This is for a group tour in Africa or Asia. Thank you again, Quest Nature Tours. 3665289 is the winning ticket. 3665289. Next, thank you, Rose Hat, who kindly donated some bird seed. The winning number is 3665597, 3665597. Next, we have a one-night stay at Turn Inn, B&B, tee-hee, cute pun. And this is from Turn Inn, B&B, Kelly Moore and Heidi Stanforth. Thank you. Woo! 5490485 is the winning ticket, 5490485. Item 34, Vortex Diamondback 8x42 binoculars. Thank you, Vortex, for donating this. 5490351 is the winning ticket, 5490351. And then we have Zeiss Terra 10x42 binoculars. Thank you to Zeiss Gentech. The winning number, 3665594. 3665594. Next, Prosecco and Zinfandel wines from a kindly anonymous donor. And the winning ticket, 3665172. 3665172 is the winning number. So many gifts. More booze. Number 37, Chianti and Palomino Fino wines. Again, from an anonymous donor. The winner is 3665333. The winning raffle ticket, 3665333. Someone's happy. Next, Madeira ice wine from an anonymous donor. The winning ticket, 3665534. Maybe it's the same winner. 2 numbers in a row, 3665534. Next, item 39, Grappo Rialto from an anonymous donor. The winning number, 3665259. 3665259. Next is a $50 gift certificate from Jose's Bar and Grill. And the winning ticket is 7707287. 7707287. Muchas gracias, Jose. Item 41, a $25 gift card for the cannabis retail store. And the winning ticket is 7707310. Sweet. The next prize is Birds New to Science, David Brewer. And the number is 125995. The winning ticket, 125995. Next, we have a beautiful Cape May Warbler photo print, courtesy of Lynn Freeman. Thank you, Lynn. The winning ticket, 125994. 125994. Still more. A common merganser photo print. Again, thank you, Lynn Freeman. The winning raffle ticket number is 3665254. 3665254. Next, bird garden ornaments. Thank you, Lynn Freeman. The winning ticket, 3665430. 3665430. Next, we have an owl sculpture. Thank you again, Lynn Freeman. The winning ticket is 7707268. 7707268. Good. Sounds like we have a winner. Next, we have Match a Pair of Birds and What Bird Am I? Games from Lynn Freeman. It's like she cares very much about the OFO. Thank you, Lynn. And the winning number is 3665442. 3665442. Next, from the Addams family, assorted squash. How seasonal. Two winning tickets here, 3665523 and 7707174. Again, for squash, 3665523 and 7707174. Next, Huron Fringe Festival, a gift certificate. 3665677. 3665677. And finally, a pièce de résistance. Thank you, Camo Girls. Marsh Sandpiper glass set. I was admiring it earlier. It's remarkable. The winning raffle ticket is 7971163. 7971163. So that is it. Congratulations to the winners, of course. Thank you so much to the donors, to Peely Wings, the sponsor, to Jeremy, and the other organizers.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening. If I could have your attention. My name is Henrique. For a lot of people, I recognize a lot of the people in the crowd here tonight, but for those of you that don't, my name is Henrique. I'll be your MC for this wonderful evening. We have a pretty great night in store for everybody, and we hope to be finished tonight's events by 9:30 p.m., so not too late. If anybody has any feedback or concerns about OFO's equity and inclusion activities, I would kindly direct them to Jack Alvo or Lynn Freeman as well, if you have any questions. And I would also like to start tonight's evening with a land acknowledgement. Now, we are on the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, composed of the Ojibwa, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi. Specifically, this is the home of the Caldwell First Nation and part of the House of Walpole Island First Nation. We acknowledge the caregivers of this land and all the moccasins that have traveled it over time. Now, we have quite a few events in store, quite a few people speaking tonight. And I think it's very appropriate that I introduce this very first speaker. He's not going to be up here for long, but he's going to be talking about the checklist of birds that we have accumulated during this convention. I'm sure a lot of you already recognize this man. He really needs little introduction. In fact, he's been emceeing these conventions for 21 years, which is very impressive. And yeah, absolutely. And they have finally found somebody to replace him with. For the next 21 years. He is an Algonquin Park legend. Ron Tozer will be presenting a summary of this year's checklist tally. Please welcome Ron Tozer.
I'm wearing my hat tonight so that it cuts down on the glare, for one thing, and also I look more like the young birders who are wearing their hats. I appreciate Henrique pointing out that for 20 years the board was trying to get rid of me, and they finally succeeded. In any case, I jest. I am supposed to be up here just to talk about the birds, and I'm going to do that. But I'm going to take this opportunity, and if we do go over 9:30, it's not my fault. I couldn't help noticing tonight that there are among us, and myself included, birders that I might call age-challenged. And I feel that OFO has done a lot, especially in the recent years, to encourage and help young birders. But those of us who see the end in sight are not maybe getting the same attention. So I'd like to share with you something that I have developed for older birders, and it's called aura birding. Now, you may wonder, what is that? In my particular case, I'm a good example of how aura birding is helpful. I can walk as far as most of my young birder friends when we go after a rare bird. And for that, I'm truly thankful and wonder how much longer it'll last, actually. But when I get to the site, there's an excellent chance that I will not be able to either hear or see the bird. However, once you apply the concept of aura birding, this problem goes away, and you can continue to enjoy the birds. So what is involved with aura birding? Well, first of all, you gather, as I've been able to do in Algonquin Park, a group of exceedingly skilled young birders, and you get them to take you to where the bird is. Then, chances are good, in my case, that I won't be able to hear it or see it. But if I can sense its aura, aura birding. Okay, enough of that. Back in, stay near the mic, Ron. Back in 2012, the OFO conventions moved from up to 3 days. Some of you may remember that. It was at Presqu'île, the first one, and I just want to run through some numbers so that you'll get an idea what 3 days of birding by these skilled people can turn out at various places. At Presqu'île in 2012, we had a total of 178 species. In 2013 at Point Pelee, we had a total of 178. In 2014 at Ottawa, a total of 152. At 2015 in Point Pelee, 184. 2016 in Kingston, 181. 2017 at Long Point, 188. And then Point Pelee came through in 2018, the last of the conventions, with 194. After 2 days, and one more day for some of us, fortunately, to continue birding, we have 173 species this year. So we're within striking distance. There are, in some ways, this has been better than even the big 194 year. I think we had 23 species of warblers in the 194 Point Pelee year, and there are 24 now. So quickly, and then I'll get off the stage because I've been advised get off the stage. Thank you for that. Perhaps the most noteworthy species on the list, and I ask you to look and make sure we haven't missed anything. I'm hoping many of you have been able to see the juvenile unbanded piping plover at the tip of Point Pelee, which is a really good bird. Sedge wren is unusual in fall at Pelee. The dick sissel that was heard flying over is a good bird. Greater white-fronted goose, and one that I know many of you would have enjoyed seeing, a male hooded warbler in Tilden's today, a male. So there's some of the good birds. Thank you very much, and if you are age challenged, please consider aura birding. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. That was wonderful. Good to hear that great news, too, of all those counts. I have a couple of prizes that are still yet to be picked up. So if you listen up, the 2023 calendar donated by Hilliardson Marsh, ticket number 3665019. That's 3665019. And the other prize that's still to be picked up is the $250 gift certificate for a group tour in Africa or Asia, donated by Quest Nature Tours, 3665289, 3665289. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan and Ron. Ron, fantastic. It's no surprise that they let you MC this for over 20 years. Now, I'd like to introduce you to the president of the Ontario Field Ornithologists, Jeff Skevington, who will be conducting the annual general meeting, as well as presenting the certificates of appreciation for tonight. So, welcome, Jeff Skevington.
Thanks very much, Henrique. Let's see if this works now. And off we go. Okay. All right. So the key is to try to get through this fairly quickly. Unlike Ron, I will probably make us later than we planned. But anyways, I want to tell you a lot about things we've done this year, so that'll take a bit of time. But anyways, welcome to everybody. It's fantastic to be back and have everybody here and see everyone and all these familiar faces again. It's really a pleasure to see everyone here. This gives you a quick idea of what we're going to do tonight at the meeting. I'll do the AGM talk, the certificates of appreciation. Then we'll have our distinguished ornithologist presentation, and finally the keynote by Marilyn. So let's get started with the AGM right now. Officially checking in. We're going to go through all this order. I won't bore you with it, but I do have pictures of birds on all the slides tonight, so enjoy. I've put on the credits for people who've donated those pictures for us to use. So call to order at, I guess, what time is it? It's 7:40. Were we on schedule? Looks like it. Excellent. Okay. So we have a few votes we have to do tonight, and this is part of just being an organization like this. We have to get through these things. So I hope people, at least some of you, have had time to look through the package that's been distributed electronically and at your tables. And so I will make a motion to accept the 2021 general meeting minutes. And we already have seconders. We've done this to keep things moving along. And so for starters, I'd like to open it for discussion. Does anyone have any questions or comments that they'd like to make about the minutes from last year? That will move it along. So, all in favor? Excellent. Any opposed? Okay, it's carried. And any abstaining? Okay, thank you. Carried. Done. All right, so this is really the fun part, is telling you about things that were accomplished by the organization this year. And I suspect not everybody knows all these things, so I want to spend a few minutes going over this. For starters, we continue to grow as an organization. We had a 10% growth in membership this year, which is phenomenal. Several reasons for that. One is that we have a new program. 66 of the 174 new memberships were free, which is part of a program that our EDI committee started. And we're very, very proud of that and pleased, yes, it's excellent news for our organization. So, and lots of, I assume many of you, if not all, have participated, and we've had webinars and various bird quizzes and YouTube streams and things, and we have a lot of people to thank for that. Sarah Rupert did a lot of heavy lifting for that, but also Dave Milsom, Monica Croydon, and Lynn Freeman. So those have been things that really got us all through COVID as a group, and we continue to do those things in a little bit lesser extent now, but we're still doing them. We've got a few different listservs and things that are maintained by OFO. One is Aunt Birds, and a lot of people perhaps think it's getting to be a dinosaur because it's email, of course, that's old, right? But look at that, 3,859 members still, and Bird News has over 3,400 members. So thanks to Mike Burrell very much for maintaining those and keeping them going. We have a news server, a Discord server, which is for OFO. If you're not on it yet, check it out. There are 520 members last time I checked. And this is just a way to communicate amongst ourselves a little differently. So if you have you've probably used Discord for the rare bird alerts, but if you haven't used the OFO one, check it out. We've got different channels there. It's more chatty than the rare bird alert. So there's lots of more chat channels. There's general nature stuff. There's bird stuff. There's a young naturalist, young birders group. And there are audio channels, so you can talk to each other as well. It's not just all texting, so you can actually have audio chats as well and things like that. So lots going on there. Our EDI committee, which is fairly new, it's formed in 2020, fall 2020, continues to make lots of new initiatives and moving us forward. There's a lot of great things we're doing. One of the sort of related things that's going on with that is enabled birding. And so there are a number of sites that OFO, Toronto Ornithological Club, and Birds Canada are working on, which will tell us where we can get to if you have disabilities. And so these are some great new initiatives. And new things in 2022, just to go through some of them. The free membership program I mentioned, welcoming committee, land acknowledgements, new trip leader guidelines, new field trips that accommodate people with disabilities, Pride Month programming, lots and lots of stuff. As Henrik told you, please talk to Jack Alva. Where are you, Jack? If you can just, over here. You can check out Jack, talk to him if you have any great ideas or comments or discussions you want to have about EDI, please. Wanted to acknowledge, part of my role here is to acknowledge changes, things that are changing and people who've done things for us. And so you probably all know these people, Gene Iron and Jeff Carpenter. They've been hugely involved with OFO over the years, and they were playing a role as editorial consultants for OFO News for many years. And they've retired from that position to do other things, and Michelle Martin and Mark Field have stepped up to take their place. So thank you very much, Gene and Jeff. Are they here? Stand up if you are. There's Gene. Thank you, Gene. Is Jeff here? Jeff's probably in the Arctic or something. Anyways, and I'd like our newsletter editors, any that are here, to stand up, please. Bruce Kirkland, Angie Williams, Michael Olson. Are you standing, Angie? So Angie Williams is part of our Northern Satellite meeting we're having. So I don't know if everybody's heard about this. It's a very cool idea of hers. So right now they're having a Northern Satellite meeting. They're watching us live. It's not a two-way conversation, unfortunately, but they've had their own banquets and hikes and everything in Northern Ontario. Because, of course, as you know, this is a big province, and it's too far to get for everybody to get down here. So that's great. And thanks to your OFO News team. And I should mention very briefly about OFO News. If you have any ideas for OFO News, Bruce, can you stand up one more time, please? Sorry, it's good exercise. All right, so bring your ideas to Bruce. And one of the things I've noticed since I've been doing this job is that we have to solicit a lot of content for OFO News and on birds and whatnot. It'd be much better if all of the ideas came to Bruce directly or came to Ontario Birds directly. So yes, so the more ideas he gets from you directly, the better, please. Ontario Birds, I wanted to talk about that right now too. So do we have any Ontario Birds editors in the room that would like to stand up and say hello? Excellent. Thank you, both of you. So there's been a few changes that I'll mention in terms of Ontario Birds. First, I should mention we had 25 authors contributed to the last 3 issues. So it's still going very strong, doing very well. Chris Risley has retired after 10 years working as an editor, and John Black has also retired. Stepping up are Becky Stewart, Brandon Edwards, and Jackson Cusack. So you saw Jackson there. And Chip Weslow you saw, who's continuing. And we're very, very grateful to all of them. This is something that I really can't believe. I've been president of other groups before and involved with various societies over the years. I have never been part of a group that has so many moving parts. I haven't got a clue of half the things that are going on, which is fantastic. It's really great. Lynn, of course, knows everything. But it's really amazing how many groups there are that are doing their own thing, and everything just works. It's like this banquet, it's just amazing that what people are able to put together for all of us. Fundraising, we already heard that Peely Wings is a major sponsor for our convention. I wanted to thank them again, as well as Vortex Canada for continuing support. So don't forget about Peely Wings when you're not here the rest of the year. I suspect they made out like bandits today. A little bit more about the year in review. So field trips. We had a little bit different picture this year. We were back to field trips, which was awesome, but we had number limits on them. And this is a pro and a con, right? So partly that was COVID related. But what it's done is it's actually made for a more personal experience for people going on hikes. The hikes were getting pretty big. So what we really need is, Dave Milsom and Colleen Riley have told me is we need more hikes. So if you're interested in being a hike leader, where are you, Colleen? There she is. Talk to Colleen. Compliment her on her new binoculars. From Peely Wings. Anyways, Dave would love to have been here, but guess what he's got? COVID. All right, so young birders, I want to talk a little bit about that. We had a Canada Day weekend again this year that Lynn did a lot of the heavy work for. The birdathon that Giz and Max ran was that at the Spit? Yeah, where are you, Max? Here's Max. And we were back to doing our OFO camp again after a couple of years off. So it was great to have the camp. These pictures are all from the camp. The leaders are sort of scattered across the top. It's a lot to put together. There were 6 leaders, 14 participants. You can see across the top, myself and Lynn were leading. Giz is there, Emma with the snake skin, Emma Gignac, and Amy Brunning with the pink sweatshirt on, and Angela. And it was really a lot of fun. These camps are great. Many of the young people here have been on them, and I'm sure can give you some background. If you know young people that would like to attend, we're hoping next year's might be at Hillerton Marsh with any kind of luck. That's the plan. So all of them up till now have been in Algonquin Park. And this year was the first year we ever did a canoe trip, which was really, really fun to do on the east side of the park. And we even found some rare birds, which was amazing. A new bird for me for Algonquin, which doesn't happen often, marsh wren. So that was exciting. All right, other new things, the ambassador program. So you may have heard of this. How many of you, I've just been dying to ask this, how many people saw the marsh sandpiper? Woo! That is so cool. I figured it would be like that. That's amazing. And so if you haven't heard much about the ambassador program, this was something that we sort of dreamed up to try to help out in the changing times, right? It's getting harder and harder to be able to share birds in certain circumstances. And that was a perfect example. James Holdsworth found this bird in a sewage lagoon. Of course, we never go in sewage lagoons, right? None of us. But if they're labeled. But anyways, he saw it from the road, right? And so James called me up, and it's like, what do we do? What do we do? And so Friday night at like 9 p.m., I managed to get the mayor's phone number and call him, and we were in there the next morning at dawn. So very, very, very cool. Credit to Lambton Shores Mayor Bill Weber for that. And Annie Golden, Annie, you're here, right? You want to wave? There she is in the middle table. This was awesome. So I was really excited to help organize this crazy sandpiper, but after about 5 days, it had overstayed, or 3 or 4 days, it had overstayed its welcome, and I'm like, I can't keep doing this. And then just Annie appeared, and she took care of everything. So it was great. OBRC, I wanted to mention them. So we had lots of records that were adjudicated this year, 176 records, and there are a few changes. So Anthony Caduck has taken over as secretary. Brett Freed and Mike Burrell helped with that in the past. Thank you. Nicole Richardson is the new chair, taking over from Mark Reed. Thanks to Mark. And Amanda Guercio and Michelle Martin are new voting members. All right. So lots and lots of cool stuff going on with your organization in the last year. If you have any wonderful ideas, people with the green dots are board members. Talk to any of us and make your suggestions. I've already talked to lots of people about some good ideas for the next year. All right. Financial report, always a little dry, but we'll go through it quickly. Brian Gibbon would normally do this. He's not here tonight. He sends his best wishes to everybody. We ended the year with a profit again. We don't hear that often with OFO. We often are not in a profit situation. Membership dues were up. Donations were down. And our journals cost a lot of money, and that continues to spiral upwards. And the fact that many of you have chosen to take your journals electronically is why we're making a profit, why we're not actually in debt. So thank you to those who've done that. And to those who are getting paper, fair enough. I still like paper sometimes too. So I need to make a motion. Hopefully many of you have looked at the numbers on the financial report. I make a motion now to accept the financial report for 2021. Jack Alvo has seconded that. Do we have a discussion? Any questions or comments about the finances? Thank God. All right. Brian does all this. I know very little. Anyways, all in favor? Thank you. Opposed? And abstaining? Carried. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll move right on. We have another motion here, the board and committee reports. I make a motion to accept the September 2022 board and committee reports, seconded by Giz Segler. Discussion? Any questions or comments on those committee reports? Nothing? Okay. All in favor? Fantastic. Any opposed? Abstaining? Passed. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to the Board of Directors. No laughter. Okay. It's actually my favorite photo of the entire show. I really thought this photo was amazing. Paul Legasse's photo, Wild Turkey. Anyways, the Board of Directors, an amazing board. I have so much fun working with them. It's a great privilege to be part of it. And there have been a few changes. So obviously I'm one of them. Lynn Freeman has stepped down as president after 7.5 years of doing this. Thank you very much, Lynn. I would not be here if Lynn hadn't not only asked me to do this, but offered to hold my hand through it. So it's a daunting thing. Like I said, there's so much going on. And after 7.5 years, of course, she knows all the ins and outs of the society. And I'm not going to go through all of these things, but these are written down in your package. I'm going to talk a little bit about it. But Lynn has done so much in the last 7.5 years. And many of the fruits of what we're now seeing are thanks to Lynn. And of course, the board she works on, because everyone works together. But Lynn is a real ideas person, and many of these things are her ideas that have come about. She started our EDI journey. She recruited a fantastic board. I just can't believe how great everybody is on it. She's been working a lot with young birders, and anyways, I'm not going to go through all of it. It's just everything we are right now, we really owe to Lynn. It's a lot. Brian Gibbons sent an email to the board the other day, and I almost cried. It was really heartfelt, and just showed the impact that Lynn's had on everybody on the board. It was wonderful to read. So, another person leaving the board, everybody has probably met Bob. Bob was the one welcoming you as you first came in and giving your name tags to you. Bob has organized several of these meetings in the past. He was vice president. He's been involved with mailing stuff for OFO News and Ontario Birds. So he's played a huge role. He continues to play a role, as you saw this meeting. He's still here helping. Bob's also heavily involved with the Ottawa Field Naturalist Club, and that has been a great boon to OFO. And how is that a boon? He's convinced OFNC, the Ottawa Club, to make some donations. So for this year, we had one of our campers at the OFO camp was paid for by OFNC. And there was another donation as well they made. So yeah, thanks very much, Bob, for all of your hard work. Where are you, Bob? There he is at the back. Thank you, Bob. We have 2 new board members this year, Colleen Riley and Marcy Jacklin. Thank you very much for stepping forward. Colleen's here. Where's Marcy? I saw you. Oh, there, Marcy's over at the side here. Thank you very much for joining the board. We have 3 people standing for re-election this year. Jack Alvo. And Jack has served on the board since 2019. If I have a question and I don't have access to Lynn, I go to Jack. It's those 2 people really know everything about the board. So Jack's fantastic. Thank you, Jack. Dave Milsom, also up for re-election. Please vote to re-elect Dave. I don't know what we'd do without Dave. Our field trips he's been doing for so long, since 1999. We all owe a lot to Dave for putting together the field trips. And thankfully, and this is one of the things I'm going to talk about before I finish, is redundancy. We need more volunteers, not just one person doing things. And thankfully, Colleen had stepped forward to help Dave with field trips, because with COVID, we would have been in a bit of a pickle, right, with him gone. So anyways, this is the kind of redundancy we need, but thanks to Dave. Sarah Rupert. Sarah's back in the back. Is standing for re-election. She's been with us on the board since 2016, and she does a huge amount for us with publicity and communications, and she's very much front and center with the society, and you all probably know Sarah, if not before today, or certainly after the quiz yesterday. All right. Now, we didn't have any nominations for board of director members this year, so those are the 3 that we're going to vote on. So we have to do this individually. It takes a few minutes. So first of all, we have a re-election motion. I motion to accept the re-election of Jack Alvo to the board of directors, seconded by Susan Nagy. Do we have any discussion? Okay. All in favor? All right. Any opposed? Abstained? All right. Carried. Sorry, Jack. Yes. 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 We do. We do. Excellent, excellent question. Yes, we have positions for all 3 of these people. No, I still need to do this. Yep. Besides, you get to see the pictures. So anyways, we actually have 13 people on our board if all of these motions carry, which is a full board, which is fantastic. So this next motion is to accept the re-election of Dave Milsom, seconded by Jack Alvo. Do we have any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Abstaining? Carried. Thank you. And lastly, re-election of Sarah Rupert. I make a motion to accept the re-election of Sarah Rupert, seconded by Susan Nagy. Discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Abstaining? Carried. Thank you. All right. Now here's the big bomb dropping. So, an impending change to the board. Brian Gibbon has announced that he has served the board since 2009 as our treasurer, and it's time for him to move on. He's handled the finances around the convention as well, and being a treasurer is a tough job, but doing the convention as well is difficult. So this is what I talk about when I talk about redundancy. We don't need the treasurer to do both. We can have somebody dealing with finances of this meeting and somebody else doing the overall treasurer thing, and they work together. So we don't have to have one person doing it all. Brian is very thankfully going to continue until we have a replacement for 3 months or so, and he will help during that transition. So he said he just decides he wants more time to go birding and enjoy retirement. So he's got a couple. I think he got a new knee recently, and it's given him a new life, I guess. So, anyways, thank you very, very much to Brian for all of his work over the years, and so the pitch. I've already said it's a hard job, but the pitch is we need a new treasurer. And so if you're interested in that kind of thing and helping the society out, please talk to one of the board members and let us know. If we don't find someone tonight, we'll be making some phone calls. But we need to find somebody and hopefully not twist the arms too hard. But some people love numbers, and hopefully we can find someone like that. Brian's hoping we find somebody who brings us into the next century, because he's still a paper guy. So anyways. All right, to finish up my talk here, priorities for next year. Just a few ideas here. Continuing EDI efforts, of course. Continuing the Young Birders program. I mentioned the next one might be at Hillerton Marsh, which is a cool change if they can pull that off. They're building some infrastructure that would support this, and we'll see if it all works out. But it would be nice to sort of alternate between Algonquin and somewhere else for the camp. We're looking for volunteers, as I keep mentioning. Just let us know if you're interested in helping. It's very fulfilling. It's a fantastic society to work for. We're going to keep working on that ambassador program. So what we're really wanting with that in terms of volunteers is everybody here. Why not sign up as a volunteer for the ambassador program? The idea is to have the largest network that we can across Ontario for the program. So if somebody comes to you and says, hey, I've got a golden crowned sparrow at my feeder, what should I do? Then you're the first one contacted, and then you can actually work with the ambassador group to come up with a plan. And it has to happen fast, because these birds don't always stay around for a long time. But sometimes they do, and those are the ones that are the problems, right? The ones that overstay their welcome and stay for weeks. then people get tired of us going into their communities and things. And so that's what this is to do, is to try to help deal with that. And so there's so many different opportunities for seeing a bird. It might be a one-time visit, it might be over a week or whatever, and we have to do that. What we've found is that people are really, really compliant. The marsh sandpiper, we had over, it was over 2,000, 3,000 people, it was crazy. And only one person broke our request to not walk around the lagoons, which is awesome. Like, that's very, very high compliance. So anyways, if you want to help out, let us know. Education events, lots of stuff for new members is going to happen. Redesigning the website, we keep talking about it. It's going to happen one of these years. And your ideas. So this was an idea that was brought to me yesterday. Thank you, Martin Parker. An endowment program. We've been batting this around a little bit on the board for the camp. We'd love to have it endowed so that it's all paid for and covered in perpetuity. But be thinking about this. Talk to your friends and OFO and whatnot. We'll be talking more about this, and we'll reach out to membership. But I think it's a great idea to build up an endowment fund and use it for things like the Young Birders Camp. So, any ideas or discussions you want to throw out right now? We're open for ideas. Okay, if not, come talk to board members if you have an epiphany or an idea and you want to share it. We've got lots of things that we can do for sure. All right, so the last motion is a very good one. I make a motion to adjourn the 2022 AGM and move on to the more important festivities. Do we have a seconder? I don't have a seconder for this. Brian Hobbs is the seconder. Thank you. And all in favor? I would hope so. Opposed? And abstaining? And it's carried. Thank you very much for your attention. I appreciate it. All right, now I'm going to do the certificates of appreciation as well here tonight, and so this is a lot of fun to do. And you know how I mentioned that we'd really like you to bring ideas to our Ontario Birds and OFO News people when you have ideas for articles? Well, we also want you to participate by giving us ideas for certificates of appreciation. We want more of these, and I felt when I looked through them this year that we'd miss some opportunities and things. So bring us your ideas, and let's honor some people that have helped us out through the year. Okay, so give me a second. I got to see who's here in person. I'm doing them alphabetically. All right, so only a few of these people are here. So what I'll be doing is I'll give out the ones to people who are here in person, and we'll just talk about the rest. But let's talk about this little Certificate of Appreciation program first. So every year, we recognize individuals who've contributed to birds in the birding community. Nominations are with justification. So you send your justification to Dan or to the board. We'll pass them on to Dan. And they're voted on by the board. And this is Dan, the guy that coordinates this. He's been doing it for a few years. He's an elementary school teacher with a passion for birds, and he completed his Master's of Science in 2019 on upland sandpipers, Bartramian plovers. Anyways, thanks very much to Dan for organizing this. He couldn't be here tonight. That's why I'm doing this. So let's start with Mike Cadman, who's here. Come on up, Mike. So this was a no-brainer, right? So Lynn Freeman nominated Mike for the successful stewardship of our first 3 Ontario Breeding Bird Atlases. An incredible achievement. Thank you very, very much. Come on up, Mike. Yeah. Thank you very, very much. Next. Okay, and I'll ask this question like I did with the marsh sandpiper. How many people saw the Townsend Solitaire that John Chalice had at his place? I did not. Okay, fewer people than the marsh sandpiper, but quite a few of you. So this person, John Chalice, was nominated by Dave Milsom for allowing birders to freely access his Rishago property to view this Townsend solitaire. And I think John's here tonight. Come on up if you're here, John. No? Okay, we thought he was. He ducked out, afraid of the notoriety. And that was actually a picture of the bird. All right. Anthony Glenesk, nominated by Ken McDonald for finding and sharing rare birds in his favorite patch, Lawson Line in Simcoe County. So he's been responsible for sharing things like white-winged dove and Nelson sparrows. And I think you're here. Are you here tonight, Anthony? Hey, come on up. Thank you. Thanks very much for sharing everything. Fantastic. Okay. Tim Han, nominated by Mike Burrell. Tim created a web-based tool that showed the weekly and cumulative summaries of the Winter Birding Challenge. So I suspect many of you contributed and participated in the Winter Birding Challenge, and Tim made that all very visible for us. George Hench. This is kind of interesting. We got two Golden Crown Sparrow Awards this year. Nominated by Susan Nagy. This was for his hospitality and allowing birders access to his yard. And he was really, really great. It was fun watching his posts, and he was just absolutely open. How many people saw George's Golden Crown Sparrow? Cool. Excellent. The other Golden Crown Sparrow, Carl Conzi, nominated by Jack Alvo. Carl discovered, identified it, and facilitated the viewing of that sparrow in the allotment gardens next to Rosetta McLean Gardens in Toronto, and he kept us all appraised as to its presence. How many people saw that bird? Holy smokes, a lot. That's great. Awesome. Thank you, Carl. Noam Marcus and Clyde Robinson, nominated by Giz Segler for facilitating the removal of the Frisbee golf course at West Woodbine Beach in Toronto, Ontario. Yes. We love these little conservation wins to protect the seasonally flooded dune and meadow habitat there. So thanks, Noam and Clyde. Sonia Richmond and Sean Morton, nominated by Angie Williams for their leadership and dedication to promote bird conservation and ornithological research through their Hike for Birds across the Trans-Canada Trail. So yes, I assume many of you have been following their exploits. Sonia in particular is very, very visible online, sharing her exploits on that. Dan Strickland, nominated by Jim Richards for the research and determined work that led to the name change of Grey Jay back to Canada Jay. Many of us are passionate about that, and thank Dan for that. And Dan's been someone that many of us know through Algonquin Park for years and years. And he's probably working on Canada Jays out west or something right now, which is why he's not here. The mayor of Lambton Shores, Bill Weber. I mentioned earlier about the marsh sandpiper viewing, and I nominated Bill for allowing us access to Thedford Lagoons and the marsh sandpiper in Lambton County. And it was really neat. I mentioned to him the whole thing, and right away I was like, ooh, liability. And as soon as he said the L word, I was like, oh, no. Because right away you could just see him cloud over, and it's like, oh, here we go. I said, what? Well, OFO has insurance. I said, what if an OFO member was there every day, and OFO took this as an outing, an OFO outing, and we did it that way, and then we handled the liability. Boom, he was in. So you have to think on your feet. But anyways, great that Bill was so helpful. All right, and so those are the typical awards that we give out every year. This is a new one, the Award of Special Merit, and this was nominated by Lim Freeman. This is for Barry Kent McKay. Now Barry couldn't be here tonight, but I hope you all saw his artwork at the back, all of his original artwork, and this award is for his dedication and tireless work that he performs devoted to the welfare of birds and other wildlife. And of course, his continuous support of the OFO through generous donation of striking and original artwork for the covers of Ontario Birds and Other Deeds. So you can see the cover here that he drew, painted for this issue, and of course, look back through all your Ontario Birds issues, and Barry Kent McKay is there on almost all of them, if not all of them, for many, many, many years. So thank you very much. Glenn Cody is going to accept this award for Barry. Thank you, Glenn. Glenn brought all that artwork you're looking at up for us, and he will accept this award. And I just wanted to say that have a look at the award if you get a chance. So watch where Glenn's going with it so you can look at it. And this is how our group works. So I put together a mock-up of the award, and immediately Sarah made it much better. Mine looked pretty ragged compared to that. Anyways, thank you, Sarah. All right. And that's it for me tonight. Thank you very, very much for your attention, everyone.
Thank you very much, Jeff. There's a lot to be proud of in this Ontario birding community. Next, we are going to be presenting the Distinguished Ornithologist Award. And of course, that award is given to somebody who has contributed greatly to ornithology in Ontario and elsewhere. We are sitting amongst multiple past recipients of this award. If you have received this award, the Distinguished Ornithologist Award, please stand. Thank you very much for your contributions. Now here to present the award, the recipient of tonight's award is Doug Tozer. Round of applause.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to be here. And in a few moments here, I may actually get this to work. All right, there we go. Okay, so I've known Erica for over 2 decades, during which I've worked, volunteered, and completed 2 graduate degrees under her supervision. And as we shall see, she's had an extremely productive career with numerous contributions to bird conservation. And these accomplishments alone, of course, are worthy of the Distinguished Ornithologist Award. But the contribution I believe distinguishes Erica the most is what she's done above and beyond these pursuits. And in particular, the manner in which she has thoughtfully trained and mentored legions of highly skilled students, and especially the strong and unique role model she's portrayed to them in doing so. So over the next 15 to 20 minutes, I'd like to take you on a brief tour of Erica's life path and accomplishments to illustrate her outstanding worthiness for this award. Erica was born in Holland in the 1950s when the country was still recovering from the Second World War, and like many Dutch at the time, her parents immigrated to Canada. Erica's father was a medical doctor and eventually went into psychiatry, and as a result, the family of 5 moved in quick succession between Toronto, St. Thomas, Uxbridge, and ultimately Michigan. So Erica completed her BSc at the University of Michigan. While there, she worked in the university's Museum of Zoology, where she met her husband, Chris Risley, and lifelong friends and mentors, the late David Hussell and Erica or Ricky Dunn, all longtime dedicated OFO members. Later, all 3 would come to play important roles in Erica's professional path. But Ann Arbor proved too urban for Erica's liking, so she spent a year of her undergrad studying abroad at Humboldt State University in rural, picturesque California. Erica's ornithological career was hatched during these dynamic early years. A series of experiences during this period very likely fueled her keen interest in birds generally and the major groups of birds and their habitats that she and her students would later focus on during their research. In Uxbridge, when she was 10 or so, close friends of Erica's parents introduced her to the wonders of the forest by showing her around their woodlot and pointing out various plants. While on a forest ecology field course in northern Michigan, one of the instructors pointed out a striking male scarlet tanager, which continues to be an inspiring memory for Erica to this day. While at Humboldt State, Erica rode her bike to the nearby mouth of the Mad River, where she was impressed by massive swirling flocks of shorebirds that ironically she couldn't identify. During her undergrad, she did surveys along a proposed pipeline between Red Lake, Ontario and Baker Lake, Nunavut. After being dropped by helicopter in the middle of a beautiful Manitoba fen, she stood spellbound as redneck phalaropes performed flight displays overhead. At Chris's suggestion, Erica applied to work at Long Point, Ontario, initially for Ricky and later for David, who had both migrated to Ontario by this time. This work produced her very first peer-reviewed publication in 1980, which you see here. Dozens and dozens more, of course, would follow later. While at Long Point, Erica helped Ricky study black terns, which helped build Erica's later interest in water birds. Ironically, the picture of Erica shown here in the top right was taken the year I was born. And 24 years later, Erica would supervise me during my MSc to do research on marsh birds in the very same place where this picture was taken. Also while at Long Point, Erica got hooked on plovers while spending time with Michael Bradstreet and others who were studying killdeers and piping plovers on the point. So with her passion for bird research strengthening, Erica followed her undergrad with an MSc at the University of Guelph, supervised by Ron Brooks. Her thesis looked at factors affecting the nest success of killdeers on the point. Next, she completed her PhD studying the reproductive strategies of American oyster catchers in coastal Virginia under the supervision of Alan Baker at the University of Toronto. And then a chance event sparked the next major turn in Erica's path. She knew she wanted to do a postdoc, and she had applied to various positions, but none had inspired her. She happened to attend a talk by Jamie Smith from the University of British Columbia and was struck by his kind ways and the nature of his research and teaching. So she completed her postdoc with him, working on song sparrows and, of course, shorebirds. Erica's thoughtful teaching and mentoring style was no doubt inspired in large part by Jamie, of whom she's always thought very highly. It was, therefore, an extreme pleasure for me to nominate Erica for the Society of Canadian Ornithologists Jamie Smith Memorial Award for Mentoring, which she graciously received in 2011. So shortly after completing her postdoc, Erica obtained deployment at Trent University in Peterborough, Ontario, where she's happily remained for decades as professor, biology department chair, and director of the Environmental and Life Sciences graduate program. And it's from this vantage point at Trent that she really dug in and began delivering her legacy of contributions to ornithology and bird conservation in Ontario and elsewhere. Erica's academic accomplishments are impressive. She's attracted nearly $3.5 million in research grants and has published over 150 peer-reviewed publications. She's taught countless undergraduate students, including ornithology, for over 20 years, and her popular research, design, and data analysis for over 30 years. She's mentored over 60 graduate students, sometimes over a dozen simultaneously. Over half of her graduate students have gone on to professional careers in wildlife science in Ontario, almost all of them in ornithology. Notably, at least 12 have gone on to work for the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, 5 for Birds Canada at Long Point, 3 for Ontario Conservation Authorities, and 3 for environmental consultants in Ontario. So the collective influence that these numerous well-trained individuals have had on bird conservation in Ontario and beyond is simply priceless. I once asked Erica, "How many graduate students have you got now?" She replied, "Oh, I've really cut back. I'm down to single digits." I continued, "So how many is that?" In all seriousness, and without a hint of seeing the irony, she looked me in the eye and said, 9. Nonetheless, Erica always seems to provide the support and mentorship that each of her many students requires by throwing simply Herculean effort to the cause. The majority of Erica and her students' research has been on Arctic breeding shorebirds and forest breeding birds. The rest has involved a diverse set of topics and species, including conservation issues faced by grassland birds like bobolink, Arctic breeding geese such as snow geese, aerial insectivores like barn and bank swallow, and marsh birds like bitterns and rails. Erica's initial shorebird research focused on semi-palmated plovers breeding at Churchill, Manitoba, and American oyster catchers nesting along the Atlantic coast of the US. Most of this work collected baseline information to test hypotheses explaining life history variation and is ongoing. Later, Erica's shorebird research expanded to other species, including whimbrel, redneck phalarope, upland sandpiper, and lesser yellowlegs. Erica's shorebird research also expanded to other locations, including Agamaskie Island, Nunavut, Mackenzie River Delta, Northwest Territories, state of Georgia, Cuba, Argentina, and Venezuela. This large body of shorebird research later became critical for measuring the impacts of climate change on shorebirds. It has been especially important for identifying where and when shorebirds are most vulnerable throughout their annual cycle. The research has led to action groups, conservation plans, and on-the-ground efforts to protect key sites, all of which are vital for conserving populations of these species, some of which are rapidly declining. Erica's initial forest bird research focused on the influence of forest fragmentation on the population dynamics of forest breeding birds, particularly ovenbirds. And one of these projects was especially timely and impactful. Her first Trent University PhD student, Dawn Burke, published a paper in the late 1990s entitled "Influence of Food Abundance, Nest Site Habitat, and Forest Fragmentation on Breeding Ovenbirds." Now, up until then, high nest depredation was thought to be the key factor causing issues for breeding ovenbirds and other songbirds in fragmented forests. But this manuscript single-handedly turned this predator hypothesis on its head by showing that low arthropod food abundance was just as much, or maybe even more, to blame. The article was met with wide acclaim and provided a critical and timely turning point in our collective understanding of the effects of forest fragmentation. So with a strong start in forest bird research, Eric and her students turned to other timely questions of interest. Much of this involved measuring the response of forest bird abundance, diversity, and reproductive success to different silvicultural techniques, including uniform shelterwood, single tree selection, and group selection harvesting. Some of the work focused on the influence of harvest on specific species, including rose-breasted grosbeak, wood thrush, yellow-bellied sapsucker, and brown creeper. The work also included the effects of logging on insects, the influence of roads and trails on forest birds, and incidental take of birds' nests during harvest. This large body of silvicultural research led to improved forestry regulations, numerous best management practices, and more sustainable harvests. There's ample additional evidence of Erica's scholarly successes. She has served as a peer reviewer for over 35 different journals, often reviewing up to 20 articles per year. She's been president of the Society of Canadian Ornithologists and the Waterbird Society. She's also an elected fellow and has been a counselor of the American Ornithological Society and is co-chair of their ad hoc committee on English bird names. Erica has received numerous academic awards, including Trent University's Distinguished Research Award, the Society of Canadian Ornithologists Doris Hustis Spears Award for Outstanding Lifetime Contributions in Canadian Ornithology, and as we see here, the American Ornithological Society's Loy and Alden Miller Research Award for Lifetime Achievement in Ornithological Research. There's no doubt that Erica has had a very productive academic career, although this is only part of the full story. She's been involved in a number of initiatives that go above and beyond her academic pursuits. For instance, she's contributed to the Peterborough Sustainable Development Committee and has been heavily involved with assisting Syrian and Afghan refugees to get comfortably settled in Peterborough. She's also led a banding program for northern saw-whet owls near Peterborough for 25 years. The program has captured and released over 2,000 owls and has enhanced the practical skills of over 100 young ornithologists, 3 of whom have used the dataset for their honors thesis, and 1 of whom published their results in Ontario Birds. With such a long list of her professional accomplishments, you would think that Erica might be the most demanding supervisor of all in terms of what she expects from her students. In fact, she's one of the most thoughtful and understanding academic advisors anywhere. She definitely expects her students to work hard and show good progress, but she's also a strong advocate of a healthy work-life balance. And it's not just help and advice with research that's open to discussion. Just about anything can be brought to the table. It's quite possible to go into Erica's office and get questions answered about data analysis, for example, but also come out with advice on how to improve your relationship with your partner. In fact, I can honestly claim that I've discussed things with Erica that I've only ever discussed with my own mother. Erica's quite literally an all-purpose supervisor, a true friend, and a student's mother away from home, so to speak. I suspect that many of Erica's students have had a much more positive experience in graduate school due to her thoughtful guidance and mentoring. Erica's thoughtful mentoring is only one of the ways by which she positively influences others. She also teaches by example, by doing what she advocates. One of Erica's former graduate students, Anne Corkery, sums up Erica's leadership in this manner quite nicely, and I quote, "One of the most inspiring things about Erica is that the way she lives her life is truly reflective of what she teaches. She cares deeply about the people and the natural world around her and will openly discuss these matters with those she meets. I always stand to learn something new from her, and I can truly say that knowing Erica has played a significant role in shaping me into the person I am today." Now, prior to Erica, OFO's Distinguished Ornithologist Award had been granted 22 times to 23 recipients. Only 3 of the previous recipients have been women. Ricky Dunn was the first in 2010, who received the award along with her now late husband, David Hussell, presented to them by none other than Erica herself. Then Jean Iron in 2016, and Margaret Bain in 2019. Erica is therefore the 4th woman to receive the award. I've had the great pleasure of knowing and or being closely mentored by all 4 of these accomplished individuals, and I'm quite pleased, as I'm sure you will be too, that Erica now joins them along with the many other worthy recipients. It should now be very clear that Erica has made outstanding and authoritative contributions to the scientific study of birds in Ontario and beyond, that she's been a resource to the Ontario birding community, and that her research on birds has resulted in much new ornithological knowledge. All of these major accomplishments are, of course, worthy of the Distinguished Ornithologist Award. As we have seen, however, it's what Erica has accomplished above and beyond these professional accomplishments that I believe distinguishes her the most. And even more impressive, Erica, along with her husband Chris, somehow found time during all of this to raise 3 wonderful daughters. I find it gratifying that Dawn Burke was Erica's first Trent University PhD student. And in turn, I was Dawn's first Trent PhD student, co-supervised with Erica. I'm now very lucky to be the program director of the Long Point Waterfowl and Wetlands Research Program at Birds Canada, through which I have co-supervised or mentored graduate students, postdocs, and other young professionals. I've tried very hard to teach and mentor students and colleagues in the same thoughtful way that Erica taught and mentored me. It's inspiring to consider that each of Erica's many students has likely taught and mentored their students or colleagues in a similar way. That makes for legions of enthusiastic, dedicated, and passionate ambassadors of wildlife conservation and sustainable living throughout Ontario and beyond. And it does not end there. Erica's thoughtful mentorship of her students will be passed along from advisor to student, from colleague to colleague, over and over for a long time to come. That, in my opinion, is Erica's most important and distinguished contribution that's earned her this well-deserved award. Congratulations, Erica, as recipient of OFO's Distinguished Ornithologist Award, and many thanks to you for going above and beyond with your many important and meaningful contributions to ornithology and bird conservation in Ontario and elsewhere. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And would you like to come up and say a few words, please, Erica?
I'm kind of blown away by that. So if people know me, it's deeply embarrassing, but it's also a great honor to have Doug give it, one of my all-time favorite students. He was a wonderful, wonderful student working on and doing seminal work on the yellow-bellied sapsucker, best around. And I think that's all I'm going to say. Thanks very much.
Okay, now I think I hand it back over to our trusty MC.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Doug, and Erica, congratulations. At this point, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker for tonight, Marilyn Simmons. And now Marilyn Simmons started watching birds when she was 7, and actually she's been a writer for almost as long. Very impressive. She was born on the Canadian prairies and grew up in Brazil and published her first book at 29 years old. She is now the author of 20 books published internationally, including many different varieties of genres. Literary fiction, such as the novel The Holding, a New York Times Book Review Editor's Choice, and creative nonfiction, including the Canadian classic The Convict Lover, as well as personal essay, memoir, and travel. With her husband, author Wayne Grady, she lives in Kingston, Ontario, in the spring and summer, and in the mountains of central Mexico during the cooler months, enjoying birds in both their breeding and wintering grounds. But don't worry, she's been coming to Pelee Island for 20 years, welcoming those birds back from Mexico every spring, and sits on the board of directors of the Pelee Island Bird Observatory. Her new work, Woman Watching, is an innovative memoir biography of Louise de Caroline Lawrence, an extraordinary recluse who changed the way that we see birds. Margaret Atwood, hailed the book as lyrical, passionate, and deeply researched. Kyle McLear, author of Birds, Art, Life, wrote, "Woman Watching is unlike anything I've ever read. It's radical, it's ravishing, simply brilliant." And Ian Davidson, director for Americas of Bird Life International, called it a must-read for anyone who wants to understand how the nature ethic is woven into the fabric of our nation. Marilyn is an incredibly kind and approachable person and is happy to sign books after tonight's events. Please welcome Marilyn Simmons.
He's great.
Thank you, Enrique, for that wonderful introduction. I can't see the people right here. I wonder. How's that? You think that'll work? Yeah, okay. Hey, I can see you people now too. Well, actually, I can't see you. I am a recent subscriber to Aura Birding, and I actually can hardly see the hand in front of my face. But I know you're out there because there's a lot of color and a lot of blobs, so excellent. It's really a pleasure to be here, especially your first, in-person event after all this time. It's a bit daunting too, I have to admit, being around all of you incredibly fantastic birders. I've been birding for a long time, but it hasn't made me a lot better. But I love it, as all of you do. I couldn't think of a better way of getting into Louise's life from this amazing, sort of mini documentary of Erica Knoll's birding life. What you're going to see is the contrast in birding and in bird knowledge and in women in birding in the 50 years between those two women. It's quite remarkable. Before I start, I want to mention something. So you have some little pamphlets on your table for Prismaticos project. That's a project that my husband Wayne Grady and I started together with Rodrigo Lopez, who you might remember from, I think, maybe the last in-person convention you had. So he's a friend of ours in Mexico. And together we've put together this project where we collect previously loved binoculars in good condition here in Canada, binoculars and scopes, and we're taking them to Mexico and through Rodrigo and his contacts, distributing them to conservationists and park rangers and schools, people who, it's a third world country and without a leisure culture. And binoculars are a rarity, and without binoculars, without being able to see the birds, it's very hard to convince people the need to preserve habitat. So, if you have any previously loved binoculars that you've upgraded from, then please be in touch with us. We would love to take them to Mexico with us. So this evening I'm going to talk about Louise de Caroline Lawrence, a remarkable self-trained ornithologist in mid-century, worked in the Northern Ontario bush. She was a woman of many lives who eventually turned her back on all of them in order to spend the last 50 years of her life studying birds. And it's a privilege actually to have in the audience at least one person who knew Louise and at 19 was at an international conference where she presented her first paper. Is Bob here now? Yes, he is. He's back there. So if there's any more people like that in the woodwork, please crawl out and introduce yourselves to me. So never a day alike to the other. Louise said that to me the last time I was with her. The phrase perfectly captures, I think, the way she lived her life before she found birds, but especially after. So in the next 30 minutes, we're going to go birding with Louise, watch her develop into Canada's one of Canada's most significant amateur naturalists and nature writers of the mid-century. I'm going to read a bit from the book, talk a wee bit about how the book came to be, and why I'm a writer and not a waitress. Some of Louise's background might be familiar to those of you who've heard me speak before, but stick around because I think you'll learn some new things here. So, I met Louise in 1980. She was an imposing woman, tall, square-jawed, very Swedish in her look, handsome, no nonsense, with penetrating eyes, probably the most honest, the most direct person I've ever met. I was barely 30 and living with my family in the bush. I had just written my first book. Louise had just written her last, To Whom the Wilderness Speaks, although we didn't know that at the time. I had brought my copy to the North Bay Public Library to get her to sign it, and I came late, hoping the crowd would have thinned, but the room was still jammed with people. Even so, she and I made a connection, and we met occasionally over the decade after that. The few times we were together, we would talk birds and writing and the Northwoods and how the Northwoods inspired us and at the same time threw up its obstacles. In 1989, when she was 95 and I was just 40, I wrote a profile of her for Harrowsmith magazine. Remember Harrowsmith magazine? She liked it so much she asked me to be her biographer, and I said yes, as I have said to most things in my life. But I moved and she died, and I didn't write the biography right away, clearly. But the idea of this woman watching in the woods stayed with me. What drove her particular brand of curiosity? What fueled her passion for birds that didn't falter for more than half a century? And what in her background or her character or her circumstance conspired to shape this aristocratic immigrant woman isolated in a log cabin in the Northern Ontario bush into one of Canada's most significant amateur naturalists and nature writers? So, Louise grew up with birds. In fact, according to the family legend, her first words were not mama or papa, but craw, craw, the sound of the hooded crows that would fly over her carriage. She was born into privilege. Her father was Chamberlain of the court of King Gustav V, and her godmother was the Queen of Denmark. She spent her first 17 years on the family estate called Svenskund on the Baltic Sea. Her father, who's right there, Sixten Flack, was a noted conservationist, and he and his friends actually started the world's second conservation area. The world's first is Yellowstone National Park. The second is a conservation area on Karlsö Island in the Baltic Sea that they created in order to save the razorbill ox from extinction there. Louise was born in 1894, so she grew up at the end of the 19th century in sort of the exercise and health-crazed movement, the same movement that brought us bran flakes and Kellogg cereals. She grew up to be hardy and fearless. She loved the outdoors. She would join her father on his bird walks. He taught her to watch for the arrival of the pied wagtail on the 8th of April every year. He taught her the phonetics for the song of the chaffinch. In the winter, she'd help him set up these grand feeding stations outside their dining room window where she would stand for hours learning the names and the calls and the songs of the bird life in her woods. She was the eldest of two daughters, so she expected to inherit Svenskund, and in fact was tracking her father and learning the ropes when her father suddenly died when she was 17 of a gastric ulcer. And the estate, as it turned out, was up to its eyeballs in debt, and it had to be sold, so she moved into a small apartment in Stockholm with her mother and sister. But when the First World War broke out, shortly after, she turned her back on all that privilege and signed up to train as a Red Cross nurse. She was posted to a Russian POW camp where she fell in love with Gleb Kirilin Nikolaevich, an officer in the White Russian Army. They married, and he was repatriated to Russia, and she followed him up to Archangel. If you know your geography, that's just inside the Arctic Circle in far northern Russia. And that's where the White Russians were fighting the last days of the Russian Civil War between the Reds and the Whites. The Russians were defeated, or were on the brink of being defeated. And so in the depths of February 1920, Gleb and Louise joined 1,000 sleigh loads of refugees, soldiers, and nurses on a mad dash across from Archangel to the Finnish border. Through blizzards. It was just, the description of it is just harrowing. They were captured. They didn't make it to the border. They were captured by the Bolsheviks and sent to prison in Moscow. And that's where Gleb disappeared. So their plan had been to emigrate to Canada, because Canada was the country they found that was most like Sweden and Russia. She stayed on in Russia for 4 more years looking for her husband, and when she couldn't find him, she emigrated to Canada alone. She was hired by the Canadian Red Cross to set up one of the first Red Cross outpost hospitals. This was an experiment in healthcare for Canada to bring healthcare to remote regions. So she was hired to set up the Red Cross hospital in Bonfield, Ontario. So the community donated a house that became the clinic, and the Red Cross paid the salary of the nurse, and the health care was delivered free. So she was charged with delivering health care to over 2,500 square kilometers through every season. She visited her clients, her patients in summer in her Model T Ford, Henrietta, and in winter by dog sled. She got the dog, she trained the dog, she learned how to mush, and that's how she got through in winter. So it was in the spring of 1934 that one of her mothers that she was giving prenatal care to, Elzire Dion, gave birth to the first quintuplets in the world to survive more than a day. So, I mean, this woman clearly has lived about 3 lives by this time. She became nurse in charge of the Dion quintuplets, and with her typical Swedish efficiency, resourcefulness, and dedication to sunlight, soap, and cleanliness, she brought those little babies through their first year. And after their first year, they had the same chances of survival as any other Canadian child. However, any of you who know anything about the Dion quintuplets will know the media circus around them. It was unbelievable. At its height, 3,000 people a day lined up to gawk at those little girls as they played. It was too much for Louise, and she retreated to a log cabin that she had built on Pimisi Bay, which, if you want to visualize it, there's a map that she drew on the left. So Pimisi Bay is just about halfway between Mattawa and North Bay. It's a bulge in the Mattawa River, not too far from where it begins at Talon Chute. So she was 41, and at last she was back to the life she had started out to live, a life in nature. With her hired man, Len, she set up bird feeding stations outside her window, the same as she had as a child. She scattered seed on the tables and kitchen scraps on the ground. On the windowsills, Len fastened narrow troughs to bring the birds close. And Louise spent the winter sketching the birds when they came close. But none of the birds she saw in these woods were the same as the birds that she'd seen in Svenskund in Sweden. Len taught her the name of the common birds in the woods, chickadees, woodpicks, whiskey jacks. But the brightly colored birds that came through in the breeding season in the spring to nest were a mystery. And not only a mystery to her, it's hard for us to realize now how little was known about our common forest songbirds at that time. There were life histories of very, very few of them. And one day in May, a strange bird landed on her feeding table. There's going to be a test, so pay attention. He's bright orange over the belly, breast, and under the wings, which are black and white, she wrote to her mother. She wrote to her mother every Sunday for 40 years. And thank goodness, because that's where I got a lot of the information for the book. He wears a black cap over his head. He's quite big, like a large bullfinch. His wife is gray with a softer tone of yellow-green underneath and black and white on the wings. Not knowing his real name, I call him Jelly Belly. She wasn't content with Jelly Belly, of course, though the bird did look as though it had been nesting in orange marmalade. She was a nurse. She was used to calling things by their proper names. A leg bone was a femur, a bruise was a contusion. But who to ask for the scientific names of birds. Not Len, not her neighbors, who were mostly farmers and tree fellers and trappers. She knew no one educated in the science of birds. So a casual friend, hearing about her dilemma, loaned her a copy of Percy Taverner's Birds in Canada. Percy Taverner at the time was the Dominion ornithologist. You should see me running around the bush now at every twitter of a strange bird, at the flutter of wings, book in hand to watch and decide what particular bird nesting or flirting in our bushes and treetops, she wrote to her mother. The jelly belly I wrote about last time is... Who said it over there? A Baltimore Oriole. Hey, quite a rare specimen at the time, beautiful to look at. It's amazing what variety of birds there are now that I'm beginning to discover them. And I think we've all been at that stage of our evolution. So, Birds of Canada was too big to carry into the woods effectively, so she bought herself the Chapman Handbook of Birds of Eastern North America. That's my copy there. I don't know if you've seen these. The Chester Reed handbook was very similar. It was the first real pocket guides that could just, fit obviously in your pocket. So in the introduction, Chapman advises how a person should enter the woods. And she writes, as a result, I've been prowling around the bush decked out like a sniper in ferns and branches. The effect has been marvelous, with the birds, without exception, falling for the dupe. She also used to pin a cushion to the hem of her coat, so because she would be birding really early in the morning and in all weather, and with this cushion on her coat, she could just flip it under her and sit down on a soggy stump or a snowbank or whatever she needed to. Unfortunately, she never took pictures, but in our mind's eye, I think we can imagine. That camouflage with, the sniper-like camouflage worked. She had found a nest of hatchlings and wanted to know the species. Whenever she went close, yellow warblers would dive bomb her, yet neither the nest nor the young quite fit what she knew about warblers. So draped in ferns, she sneaked upwind of the nest, and she lay on the ground watching amid the buzzing black flies, and 2 flycatchers came to feed the newborns. So she was able to identify the birds as trail flycatchers, a species that since then has been split into willow and alder flycatchers, and hers were probably alder flycatchers. So the day after the Second World War broke out, Louise eloped with her hired man. And shortly afterwards, Len enlisted and was shipped overseas, and he stayed overseas for the next 5 years. And this was so significant for Louise. Suddenly, she was free of both financial insecurity because she was getting an army paycheck, but also they had started this huge chicken business and then mink. And she was able to close all that down and devote herself entirely to learning about the birds in her forest. The business of living still made its demands, but once she had, there's a picture of her there, dipping water from the stream. That's how she got her water. Her little 3-room cabin did not have electricity, running water, any heat besides the wood that she had to split and stack by her wood stove. But once all that was done, she was free to follow her curiosity, and what she was curious about was the natural world. What she didn't know was how privileged her location was. And this was something that was pointed out to me by Bob Montgomery, a biologist at Queen's University, is that her little strip of land, and it was only 3.5 acres on the Mattawa River, is right at the overlap of the most southerly part of the northern breeding birds and the most northerly part of the southern breeding birds. So she had an extraordinary number of species coming through her woods and nesting there. So, stuck in the woods, far from any kind of scientific libraries, she had to teach herself basic identification and anatomy entirely from books. I mean, imagine that. None of us have to do that now. We have groups, we have online resources, we have endless resources, and she was alone in the woods with books. And there was so much she wanted to know. So for the answers to her questions, she turned to people like Percy Taverner. She was fearless. She would write to anybody as long as she thought they could give her an answer. So she wrote to Percy Taverner, Earl Godfrey, who succeeded him at the National Museum of Natural Sciences in Ottawa, Jim Bailey at the ROM. She wrote to them about the birds she was seeing, and she peppered them with questions. One of the questions I liked best was when she asked Taverner, how do birds mate? What exactly takes place? And he replied with detailed drawings. And she wrote back to him, I'm aghast at my lack of reasoning powers, not even to have surmised such an obvious possibility. I'm not sure how obvious it is, when you think about it, but it's pretty far from mammalian reproduction. So Louise thought she was pretty good at identification after 2 years of devoting herself entirely to this, until one day a couple appeared on the path to her house, staring up at the canopy. They're in the far left there. I was no little put out when first thing they did was to discover the presence of 4 species of birds that I had no inkling inhabited my very special and private region. I was blithely under the impression I knew every single bird that was here. I think we've all had that feeling too. The couple was Doris and Murray Spears. They encouraged her to start a daily bird record, a really significant step for her, a practice that she continued for 40 years. In fact, all of her daily bird records and all her data still exists at Library and Archives Canada. Boxes and boxes and boxes of them. They also introduced her to mirrors. Short ones for looking down into low-hanging nests without disturbing the brooding bird, and long-handled ones for peering into nests far up in the canopy, which definitely cut down on the number of trees she had to climb. Because by this time she was closing in on 50. But that's pretty young, right? At the beginning of every January, she would collate her year's daily count data and create an annual bird list that included the number of species she'd seen, the arrival date, departure date in the case of migrants, and the peak date on which she had counted the most individuals in a 24-hour period. Those numbers are just astonishing. So on May 30th, she saw 55 chimney swifts. On June 6th, 26 veeries. On June 20th, imagine this, 33 red-eyed vireos. Can you imagine the song in those woods? And on October 17th, 75 American pipits. Whoops, nope. Go back there. So Percy Taverner, who's in the middle there, and Roy Ivor on the right, and Margaret Morse Nice on the lower left, they were all indispensable mentors and friends to her, but mostly Louise trained in the School of Experience. And she described this to her mother, explaining how this high-born wilderness daughter of her was spending her days. I step carefully and sometimes stumble, for my eyes are not on my feet. I see a bird and she's picking nesting material, birch bark from a tree maybe. She disappears. I see her again. I stumble forth, follow her with my eyes, and I see her go into a certain place, and the leaves move, tremble a little with her movement. She nudges a spot on a branch, the crotch of a tree high up, and she beds herself down into a half-made little nest, and out she goes again, and I stand nailed to the spot not to lose it. Does that sound familiar? So at first, I chuckled at this. So Kleenex was very new in I did look this up, but I've forgotten now. I think it came out in the early 40s. So by the mid-40s, she was observing a lot of nests, and she would mark the position of the nests with Kleenex. And and she worried that rain would dissolve it, but it never occurred to her that the birds would take the Kleenex and build their nests with it, which of course they did. So she had to replace that with strips of colored cloth. But she kept an astonishing number of nests under observation through the summer of 1946. Through that breeding season, she made notes on 62 nests. Whatever she saw or heard, she jotted down, and at the end of every day, she'd type up her notes, shaping them into something that made sense of what she'd seen. She always typed at her kitchen table, a table actually that I now have, huddling close to the wood stove in the spring and fall. Otherwise, she said, my hands would jellify on the keys. But Louise wasn't satisfied with just watching. I feel I need an aim, she wrote to Taverner. How can I do more, study better, and let it come to use for all our knowledge? Why not take up banding, he said. I don't think anyone can really know a bird until they've held it in their hand. How many people here have banded? Oh my goodness, look at all of you. Well, you know, Peely Island Bird Observatory is looking for banders. So go to their website, just a little public service announcement there, PSA. For 17 years, Louise, so 1942 to 1959, Louise operated the most northerly banding station in Ontario. And I wish I could find the statistics because I'd like to know how many other women were operating banding stations. She found plants, built herself a flat trap, caught her first bird, a blue jay, and over those 17 years she banded 2,628 birds, representing 50 species. Hardly any of them were found, I think 7 or 8, but the banding was important to her studies because it helped her differentiate males and females, and it was part of her education. In order to attract a bird, she had to know what it ate, whether it was a tree creeper or a ground feeder, shy or curious, all of which determined how to bait the trap and which trap to use. There was so much to learn. Bird studying has such scope that I feel one must limit oneself somewhere, she wrote to Taverner. From the things I've lately read about different ways of learning about bird life, it seems that a well-conducted regional study for a period of years is yet a field that is little explored. And so with that in mind, she mapped her property. The one on the right is a map she made of red-eyed vireo nesting sites. She was the first to discover that red eyes the males have a song area and the females have a nesting area. And so the little circles inside the larger circles indicate the song area and the nest area. She also parsed the meaning of the red-eyed vireo song, all their various songs, and did a major study on them. She did most of her studies on the 3-acre patch of forest that she owned, but she'd often extend her morning dawn bird walk beyond those paths. She'd paddle across the Mattawa to the wild crown land north of the Mattawa River, where she found a Canada jay nest and was the first to write write an observational study of their reproductive habits. And north of the Mattawa River, she once saw a green heron, which at the time was the most northerly record of that bird. She'd also sometimes drive in her lovely car the back roads to Grand Désert, and if you know that area north of Algonquin Park, you'll know where that is. And there she'd watch huge migrations of swallows, pipits, and raptors. One day, she crossed Pimisi Bay into Beaver Lake, which was on the other side of the road, and climbed what she called Brûlé Hill because there was a forest fire there the very night she moved into her log cabin. She thought it was going to blow over and burn her cabin. From a distance, she could see pigeon hawks, what we now today call merlins, perched up in the blackened conifers. Nearby, she found their nest 40 feet up a branchy white pine that stood alone on a rock shelf. The nesting behavior of pigeon hawks had roused her curiosity. A lot was known about them by then. There were good observational studies, but she had questions about their feeding habits. She'd assumed that an area patrolled by falcons would be avoided by small songbirds that were a regular part of their diet. And yet, she had noticed a Nashville had a favorite singing perch not 50 feet from the merlin nest. A myrtle warbler had a feeding ground right south of the nest. And she'd watched as a white-throated sparrow led its young through the bush in full view of the predator without incident. And yet, in her study area close to her cabin, she'd seen falcons capturing those same small species. So she was curious about their diet. So one day, when the adult merlins were gone, she climbed the 40 feet up the tree and took a look in the nest and found a heap of dried excrement, and under that a midden of bones. So she collected the bones, and she had just met Earl Godfrey at a conference, and so she wrote to him and asked him if she could send him some bones and debris for identification. Within weeks, he wrote back, the nest contained one leg bone of a brown-headed cowbird, the right leg of a blue jay, the left leg of a yellow-bellied sapsucker, two left legs, and not two left legs, that's impossible. No, I guess it is possible, depending on how many birds. Sorry, I'm a little side here. I wrote it, so it's got to be true, right? Two left legs and a left wing of a yellow-shafted flicker. No sparrows and no warblers at all. After a very short time, those merlin parents disappeared altogether. The hatchlings were just 18 days old, so Louise climbed up the tree again, got the hatchlings and brought them home and raised them in an old mink cage. She fed them raw liver, and mimicking the jerking motion that the female or that the parents used in order to provoke the gaping response so that they would eat. And after 8 more days, they were fully feathered. One day she opened the cage and one of them hopped out and flew up into a tree, so she left the cage open. And after that, she caught deer mice and left her kill on top of the cage, gradually moving it over to the picnic table nearby. And she would leave dead rodents and raw meat on the picnic table, and soon the merlins were swooping down to pick it up. At 5 weeks, they were making training flights over the lake. On one of those flights, some instinct took them back up to Brule Hill to the same tree where the parents had perched. After that, Louise noticed them with prey in their talons, and they stopped coming to her property, and they stayed on Brule Hill where they had been born. Without any parents, the young had learned to fly and hunt and defend their territory with all the typical posturing and gestures and calls and screaming distinct to their species. So, although the hand-raised birds were very fascinating for Louise, she was not a convert to the study of caged birds. Roy Ivor, who some of you may know as the Birdman of Mississauga, he kept large aviaries attached to his house, and he was a great believer in observing hand-raised birds. And he wrote to her and asking if she would if she would pluck some young blue jays from a nest and send them to him, and she refused. But it was actually a confrontation with Earl Godfrey that helped her determine the limits of what she was willing to do in the name of bird science. Every so often, red crossbills, white-winged crossbills, and pine siskins would invade her woods. landing on the heavily salted road that was one boundary of her property. Now that's the Trans-Canada Highway, so it's a very noisy boundary. But at the time that she bought the property, it was just a survey line through the woods. So whenever a car went by, the birds would rise up off the hill. There's quite a slope of a hill down right at her driveway. And then they'd settle back on the gravel, but there would be always casualties. Every morning, Louise would walk up and down the half mile on either side of her driveway and collect dead birds. But she watched them drinking up this snowmelt water and wondered, was it the salt or the gravel or the snow melted by the salt that they were after? If it was the salt, why were they eating it? How much were they eating? Was there a connection between the need for salt and their reproductive cycle? Because this was happening in March. So she sent Godfrey, who's there on the right, a trio of red crossbills that she found dead on the highway and asked them to examine the stomach contents. Godfrey agreed because he was very interested in red crossbills. There are several subspecies have been identified, but nobody knew which subspecies were breeding in Ontario's north. So when she told him she had a nest under observation, he asked if he could come collect, and I'm using that in the correct sense now, collect, that is shoot, the parents to determine which subspecies they belong to. It is, of course, highly important this be done, he wrote to her. I understand you may have feelings in the matter, but in an important event like this, it is necessary for us to close our eyes to sentiment in the interest of knowledge. Well, Louise bridled at the charge of sentimentality. She sent him a postcard back by rush return mail, and you could do those things in those days. And she wrote, having spent 70 hours watching the crossbill nest, I can't see how killing my subjects would advance human knowledge of the species. And in consolation, after the young had fledged, she sent him the crossbill nest, which I'm not positive that's a crossbill nest, and I'm sure somebody here is going to correct me if I say it is. But she sent it to him, and he put it up for display in the museum's exhibition hall. But despite those differences over collecting birds for science, Louise developed a close relationship with Godfrey. He became the first reader of her scientific studies. For each of her unique sightings, and she was the first to see a wintering golden-crowned kinglet that far north, Cape May warbler, Connecticut warbler. She always checked first with Godfrey to see that the species had not been recorded that far north before she published a note about it. After Taverner died, she laid all her questions at Godfrey's feet. Why was the red crossbill breeding season so long? Why did black-capped chickadees start their courtship singing in December? Did young hairy woodpeckers have a white eye ring? So Godfrey would examine the specimens in the museum's collection. Often he sent her skins to help her with difficult identifications. And where an answer couldn't be found to her questions, Louise would consider the subject an open field for an open field for study, and she would set about filling that gap. Louise had many mentors in the science of ornithology, but it was Percy Taverner who really turned her into a nature writer. More than once, he hinted that she was sentimental. Sentimental was a really, really horrible charge at the time and still now. So in the beginning, in 1940, when she first started to seriously watch the birds and identify them, she bought a big black scribbler. And on the front, she wrote notes on birds around our home, and she allotted one page for species and flipped to a new page with every new species she found. But her notes on these early sightings read like little stories. This is one of them when she saw her first Canada warbler. Saw you lovemaking so close to me in the thickets that I could have touched you. In fact, you almost took off my nose in your ardor. But Taverner provided a really necessary corrective. when a northern cardinal lingered near her cabin all through the winter of 1941. She wrote to Taverner with incredible excitement. I have long moments of pleasure watching this scarlet vision against the snow and evergreens. An old trapper came here the other day, and as soon as he saw it, he exclaimed, "Ah, mais c'est ça, porte bonheur." That's a harbinger of happiness. He had never seen one in this bush before. Well, in fact, northern cardinals at that time had been recorded at higher levels than Pimisi Bay, but even so, the bird was still a rarity in 1941. Instead of describing the bird as a scarlet vision or a scrap of red flannel flitting through the forest, which is how she described it, he suggested she write a detailed paragraph that would convince a well-informed reader that she had actually seen a northern cardinal. A statement of things as you see them, he insisted. And she responded with a concise, precise paragraph, absolutely accurate, although not entirely shorn of the really unique and lovely turns of phrase that made it recognizably hers. So Louise worked as hard on her writing style as she did at perfecting the science. Altogether, she published almost 100 articles in popular and scientific journals, as well as 6 books on birds. Her second book, The Lovely and the Wild, was awarded the John Burroughs Medal, which is the highest accolade in nature writing in the English language, and she was the first Canadian woman to receive the prize. And like Erica, she was only the 4th woman in the history of the prize, which at that point was more than 70 years old, only the 4th woman to ever receive it. She also, like Erica, won the Doris. I think she was the first person awarded the Doris Eustace Spears Award. Many of her conclusions about birds, although based almost solely on observational studies, have now been proved true through scientific research. That birdsong is language, she believed that absolutely, and that chickadees remember where they've hoarded seed in the forest and retrieve it in order. She talked to me about that one day as we were watching chickadees do that very thing. So little was known, and you know, her study of the yellow-bellied sapsucker was the first life history of a yellow-bellied sapsucker to be written, and that was true of so many of the birds that she was watching. Some of her key studies still stand as foundational. Her comparative study on 4 species of woodpeckers published in the AOU monograph series includes landmark descriptions and interpretations of woodpecker gestures, drummings, and calls, and it's still cited on Cornell's All About Birds website. Her record dawn to dusk count of the red-eyed vireo, 22,197 songs in just under 14 hours, has never been broken. And in fact, I think he might be a member of the OFO. Fred Heilinger, who lives in Presqu'île now, he told me that he actually went to visit Louise on the day she was doing that dawn to dusk bird count. And normally Louise loved visitors because, I mean, she was out in the middle of the woods. But on that day, she yelled at him, "Get out, get out," because she was busy counting. I hope she didn't, lose a couple of calls or songs because of that. And her long-term study of warbler population decline in her woods, so it was over a dozen years, she tracked 13 species of warblers, all of which declined by 10%, and this was in the 1940s, all of which declined by 10%, and 3 of which, the chestnut-sided, the mourning, and the Canada warbler, I'm thinking, declined by 75%. There's lots of reasons why bird populations decline, but she suspected that it was because of roadside spraying of toxic chemicals. This was the heyday of DDT. And so she did a couple of small studies that linked of hydrocuts, some that were sprayed, some that weren't, and came to the conclusion that it was roadside spraying. And she came to that conclusion more than a decade before Rachel Carson published Silent Spring. And Louise wasn't alone. She would be the first to tell you that. She was among many amateurs that were concerned by bird population decline at that time. I'm going to read a very short piece now from Women Watching. Are we all still awake? We're all still here? Thank you. It's amazing to look out and see all those faces. So I'm going to read a little bit from a chapter called A Limitless Capacity to Rebound, about a different kind of sharp decline in bird population. The spring of 1956 was a remarkable spring. It was slow to arrive. The ice didn't move out of the lake until May the 7th, the latest it had ever gone out. And the next day, a cold front came in and the ice started to reform. The mass of polar air stayed over her area for more than a week. She walks, great flocks of birds turn in the wind and go back. She wasn't sure where. And she said, there's a lot in nature you only think you know because it seems logical, but things may not be happening as you think they ought. On May 11th, a huge flood of warm air came in. It went up to 28 degrees Celsius. The buds swelled, the insect hatched. So Louise waited for the migrants to come. They had been stalled. They were a week, more than a week to 2 weeks late. But they didn't appear. She assumed they were flying higher above and really making tracks to get north as fast as possible. But 4 days after that 28 degrees Celsius temperature, an Arctic cold front came in and shoved the temperature back below freezing, and on that night, the birds came down. By 9 o'clock the next morning, a great mass of migrating birds overran the whole countryside. They came on this day not through the trees, but crawling, hopping stiffly from straw to dead leaf, covering the ground with their bodies. They wallowed in the snow looking for food that scarcely was there, or sat cold and shivering, trying to warm their freezing feet and the soft feathers of their bellies. I actually do have a picture that she drew. Thrushes came in great numbers, fawn-colored veeries, silent hermit thrushes. On this day, they came down from the skies in a veritable avalanche. Ovenbirds walked all over the forest floor, and in places sheltered from the snow, they turned over dead leaves, looking for a snail, a mite, whatever edible thing the leaf might cover. Nashville warblers, bright yellow dots in the snow, fed ravenously upon the yellow stamens of the pussy willows. And least flycatchers, feeling the cold badly with their utter dependence on winged insect life, hopped dismally from one grass blade to another, close to the ground. They were too bone cold to take any notice of me, stepping cautiously among them, lest inadvertently I should trample one underfoot. At 11 o'clock, the birds were still coming on, crawling northward along the ground. They covered the roadsides and the wires of the guardrails in great numbers. Thrushes and more thrushes, white-crowned and white-throated sparrows, rose-breasted grosbeaks. All through the day, the birds moved slowly and laboriously across the Pimsey Bay region in the teeth of the piercing wind, hugging the ground, seeking what scant shelter there was to be found from the icy blasts. As night came, it grew colder and colder. A ruby-throated hummingbird, rebuffed by the wind, fell on the cold cement foundation of the house and clung there for a long, miserable minute, then miraculously found strength to lift upon vibrating wings, hovering along our windows before it disappeared toward the north in the gathering dusk. There was frost every night and often snow, as one cold front after another pressed down on Louise's woods. By the third week in May, the trees were still without leaves. Louise spent most of her time making food for the birds. The flycatchers and the warblers disappeared. Whoops. I've lost my place, I'm sorry. Louise spent most of her time making food for the birds. Suet balls, peanut butter smears on the tree trunks, breadcrumbs and seeds suited to the species that were invading her small wilderness, some of them quite uncommon. Many, clearly, had never dined on human-made food. They didn't even recognize it as food, but they were starving. They saw other birds devouring the tidbits, and having no choice, they ate it too. Louise watched, horrified yet mesmerized by the irresistible migratory urge that had brought the birds to this crisis, by the behaviors the disaster provoked. Some are adaptive to emergency situations, she wrote, and some are not. And those that are not do not survive. That cold front persisted for another 10 days, and thousands of birds died. Many of them, of course, never recovered. But Louise had formed the Nipissing Naturalist Club, and the members of that club went out and collected dozens and dozens and dozens of birds. So Louise tells this story in a chapter of her book called The Lovely and the Wild. And at the bookseller table back there, I brought a couple of her early books, one of which is a first edition of The Lovely and the Wild. At the time she was writing that book, she was also indexing her first 20 years of daily bird observations, summaries that clearly trace the decline in bird life in her forests from a variety of causes: weather, DDT, natural forest succession. In The Lovely and the Wild, Louise, however, ponders what these losses might mean. And this chapter particularly resonated with me, knowing that another 3 billion birds have been lost since she was writing. So those losses that we've been counting since 1970 are on top of the huge losses that were noted in the 30s and 40s, and also at the end of the 19th century. New species were taking up the territories in Louise's woods that were being emptied of warblers, flycatchers, and thrushes. European starlings, which she'd never seen in her forest before, had suddenly appeared. The number of blue jays was on the rise. When she first started watching, she'd see 1 or 2 pairs at most. By the mid-1960s, 40 to 50 would converge on her feeders. Evening grosbeaks, which used to be occasional visitors, had become permanent residents. Red-winged blackbirds and brown-headed cowbirds, which used to be seen only in clearings, now overran her woods. But Louise questioned her own responses to these invaders who were anything but tuneful in their song. She writes, "If I'd never seen the unassuming elegance of the red-eyed vireo or heard the singing of the veery and the hermit thrush, if I'd never known the vast variety of woodland birds, might I not have looked quite differently upon these other innocents, the redwing with its scarlet epaulets, the grackle in its rich iridescence, even the cowbird in softest beaver brown? Might I not have thought them birds of striking beauty and overlooked the stridor of their voices? And having no others to compare them with, would I not have conceded their roles to be as important as those of any other birds?" I try to think like this when I listen to the Caspian terns. We were talking at our table about this. The Caspian terns squawking over our roof. We live right beside an entertainment center in Kingston, which is a nesting ground for the Caspian terns. And my goodness, they do make a racket. I try to think like Louise. I try to love them as much as a vireo, but it ain't easy. So well into her 90s, Louise continued her daily dawn bird walk, driven by her mantra, because you see a bird, you do not necessarily know it. She took notes on everything: arrival, departure dates, nesting, migration, all the bird behaviors that fascinated her. She wrote, "I know of no occupation so fulfilling as that of becoming a watcher. The observing self is pushed into the background and obliterated except for a cramped leg or an aching muscle imposed by enforced immobility. All senses are focused upon the amazing events that are constantly taking place. I think that's something we can all identify with. The last time Louise and I were together at her log house, we stood looking out her big windows that look out over Pimsey Bay. Why, she said. That was what I was most interested in. She always spoke really slowly and thoughtfully. Maybe partly because English wasn't her first language, although quite frankly, she spoke 5 fluently, so her English was pretty good. But she was always careful in what she said. She never said anything that she didn't believe absolutely to be true. You cannot imagine how it feels, she said to me wistfully, to have one question after another solved about how birds live. When I think of it now, I realize what a mammoth job it was. It's a pity I couldn't finish it. And of course, others are finishing it. It's in his book, 10,000 Birds, Bob Montgomery was one of the co-authors of that book. He postulates that as few as 10 to 15% of the world's bird species have actually been adequately studied, that there are decent life histories of all, of the other 85 to 90% of the birds. So there's still lots and lots of room for study. And really, all of us, every time we post an eBird list or join the atlasers, we're helping to create range maps that Louise and people, amateurs like her, started with their laborious banding that, in fact, yielded such small results. Louise died in 1992, exactly 30 years ago this spring. So through those, 3 decades since, I've been pondering how to fulfill my promise to her that I gave so glibly. If I was to write about Louise, I wanted readers to get to know her the way I had got to know her, through her own voice. I didn't want to be one of those omniscient biographers who pretended to know everything. I'd only known her for 10 out of her almost 100 years. Luckily, I had 26 banker's boxes of speeches, drafts of stories, bird data, and mostly letters to all of those mentors, and 40 years of her Sunday letters, which were single-spaced, 3 to 4 to 5 pages each, where she told her mother not quite everything, but almost. Certainly way more than I told my mother. As I sorted through all that material, I realized I wanted to share the process with the reader too. I wanted to take them into the reading room of Library and Archives Canada. I wanted to take them into the bird vaults at the Royal Ontario Museum. I wanted to share with them the ethical dilemmas of writing about someone that I had known for such a relatively short time of her life. And only at the end of her life, I only knew her as an older woman. I didn't know her as a privileged child or a young bride racing across the snows in her sleigh, being in prison, nursing the queen. I didn't know any of those parts of her. I had to cobble it together. So I came to see the book as part memoir, a memoir about the writing of the book, but also a memoir of my own life with birds. As Henrique said, I've been watching birds since I was a little girl, and there are little bits of my birding experiences in Canada and in Mexico sort of woven through the book where it's appropriate, not obtrusively, I hope. But it wasn't until 10 years ago when I started living half the year in Mexico in the wintering grounds of some of the songbirds that we would see here in their breeding season, that I became intensely aware of bird migration on a different level, and what it might mean for them as a species, and what my own migrations every year north to south might mean, and Louise's migrations east to west, from Sweden to Russia to Canada and back and forth to Sweden. Finally, I could see my way to writing the story of this remarkable woman, stories lifted from her letters and her speeches and her research studies, told for the most part in her own words. The birds from her forest interfeathered with the birds of my childhood, and the entire process visible from beginning to end. And where this story ends is with me living in her loghouse nest to write the final chapter of the book, walking the paths that she made, pausing to take in the same views, noting the birds that were passing through on their way south, the birds that never came, and the birds that remained, all that was still the same and all that was different. In the field, she said, that there is never one day alike to the other, never a season that follows exactly the same pattern as those of the past. And I think that's what keeps all of us, and especially Louise, watching. So thank you very much for listening. If you'd like to hear Louise's voice for yourself, I highly recommend you go to my website. Sorry, I missed one. There's her house on the left, and that's canoeing down to Talon Chute in the middle. And this is me living in her house, and that's all the chapters of the book as I struggle to get them in the right order, etc. And my website is there at the bottom. I urge you to go to the website, and if you go to the homepage, so it's marilynsimons.com, on the homepage you'll see a cover of the book. Click on that, and on the left-hand side you'll find a link to an 11-minute documentary that was made by Bragg Moment, my granddaughter, who's a filmmaker, a feminist filmmaker, and my son, who's a sound engineer for film. And he cleaned up the voice recordings from my interviews with her for Harrowsmith. And you can hear Louise's voice intermittently through the documentary. It's really quite wonderful. So I'm happy to answer questions if you have questions. I can't see anybody. So, so if you have a question, stand up and yell at me. And I will repeat the question so everybody can hear it, and I will try to answer it. So are there any questions, or are we all ready to go home to bed? What happened to Len? Len came back after, it was pretty close to 6 years he was gone. He spent the war in England as a commissary officer. So he never saw action, much to his dismay and much to Louise's great delight. And he was a great help to her. He absolutely adored her and helped her with her studies and did everything he could to make it possible for her to spend her life with birds. And she lived quite independently. Going to AOU meetings, to many other, she was a member of many international and national birding organizations, including the Ottawa Field Naturalists, and she reviewed dozens and dozens of French and Swedish and Danish ornithological magazines and books for the Auk, Wilson's Bulletin, etc. So he made a lot of that possible. The end of their life is a story I'm not going to tell you, but you will have to read about it in the book if you're interested. The books are for sale at the back, and I'm very happy to sign the books whenever you would like. Are there any other questions? Somebody will tell me if there's a hand going up, right? Oh.
Tell me more about the cabin. You said you finished your book there. Do you have access?
The cabin. The cabin is quite wonderful. It is for sale at this moment in time. It was for sale in 2015, and I thought I had bought it. I very much wanted to buy it with a view to donating it eventually as a nature writers retreat, science retreat, etc. But the woman who had bought it, and she was only the second person to own it after Louise died in 1992, She was going through something, and she withdrew, and she ended up selling it later to someone else. I could have bought it for $235,000. It's now for sale for $699,000, which is out of my price range. Many people are talking about the possibility of buying the property now. After the Toronto Ornithological Club meeting, I met a woman with some heritage experience, and she has put me in touch with the Ontario Heritage Trust. There is a plaque to Louise, by the way, on the Trans-Canada in a little pull-out park on Pimisi Bay that you can see. But no, the log house nest at the moment is rented. So please do not go there. People write to me and say, "Oh, we went there and we walked all over," and I think, "Oh no." so you know, it is private property. You really shouldn't do that. But if anybody is interested in talking about the possibility of buying this property and preserving it as a heritage site, both for nature writers and for bird science. At a talk I gave in Eden Mills, I met a bird scientist who is going to look at her data from the 1940s and compare it to what they have found now in that part of Ontario, and he would love to have access to the property to actually do bird counts there and do some kind of comparative study. So there's a lot that she has to contribute, and if anybody is interested in talking about this, come and see me after. I can't take this on, but I can facilitate putting the people together who are interested in doing so. So thank you very much, and it's been lovely to meet you all.
Thank you very much, Marilyn. That was amazing to hear. I think one of the most amazing things about our hobby with birding, and something that never fails to amaze me, is the deep history involved with early ornithologists in Ontario and elsewhere. And what really, really, really blows my mind is how anybody would have ever started birding before the internet. Like, that is just absolutely crazy. So thank you very much, Marilyn. We really are standing on the shoulders of giants, and your presentation helped us realize that. Now, before we conclude, there's a list of people that I would like to thank for organizing this evening. Most of all, I really want to thank, and if I call your name, please stand, Sue and Dan Seuss for organizing this. Where are you? At the back there. Thank you very much. I would also like to thank Jeremy Hatt. I think he's also at the back. There he is. Lynn Freeman right here at the front. Thank you, Lynn. Dave Milsom, who I don't think is here tonight, but still deserves a round of applause. Colleen Riley, who is, where is she? I saw her earlier, she's here. Brian Gibbon as well. Brian. Bob Cermak, who you all met as you were coming in. Thank you, Bob. Jack Alvo. Thank you, Jack. And of course, Jeff Skevington. Where's Jeff? There he is. This couldn't have been possible without any of you, and thank you to anybody else that I may have forgotten. The next OFO convention will be in Peterborough in 2023 in September. And good night, everybody, and good birding. Thanks for coming.